My name is Shumon Basar. I'm a writer, but 20 years ago, almost to the month, I went to work for Zaha Hadid. I was a very young student, and I wasn't prepared for what was going to happen to me there. 20 years later, sadly, Zaha has now passed away very, very prematurely. This has affected thousands, tens of thousands of people who've known her directly or indirectly. In my case, I had the pleasure of getting to know her very personally. And so I was asked to write something for the catalog here at the Serpentine Gallery. And all I could do really is think back to those few years that I got to spend with her and her incredible universe. So I've written a text called From Z to A and Zaha Again. It's a kind of portrait of her through 26 different entries. I'm going to read out some of them right now. Z is for Zaha. What's in a name? In Zaha Hadid's case, almost everything. The Z evokes the future. Think Zardoz, Zod, and other sci-fi attaches. Say Zaha out loud. It sounds like a perfectly polished steel blade cutting through the air. It suggests a neologism. If our names are promises that we grow to inevitably fulfill or entirely reject, then Zaha was destined for a time and a place always yet to come, an asymptote in reverse. Y is for youth. Some 20 years ago, when I was 21, I started to work at the office of Zaha Hadid. Located in a converted Victorian school, regardless of gender, we all arrived through the boys' entrance. I was a fresh undergraduate, meaning I was bookish and blindly ambitious, entitled and essentially ignorant, but to be let into the heart of a living avant-garde at the end of the 20th century, where the spirit of Malevich and suprematism were being kept alive. This made me ecstatic. Zaha was not prejudiced against our preternatural ages, our mawkish youth. All she cared about was whether our ambition was in kinship with hers, and whether we would be prepared to forsake sleep for this kinship. X is for X-rated. After some months, I discovered Zaha's default desire to publicly humiliate or berate me, or indeed anyone else working in close proximity to her. However, a few months later, once I'd understood that this was merely a paradoxical expression of affection and exercise in eccentric closeness, her X-rated jibes no longer felt like tiny spears, but landed like soft snowflakes. This is what it means to be simultaneously cursed and cherished at the same time. W is for woman. In the media, Zaha's name was forever prefixed by a deeply unimaginative trinity of adjectives: Arab, Muslim, and woman. None of her male contemporaries would be prefixed by something similar: Occidental, Christian, or man. Was this a backhanded insult to her and to womankind in general, to constantly celebrate Zaha as, quote, the most important female architect in the world? A spiritual predecessor was the Italian-Brazilian architect Lina Bobardi, whose output of exposed concrete out-toughs the toughest of male brutalists, while never rhetorically engaging with gender. U is for unimpressed. Even if at the office we forsook sleep for several weeks to produce a project that, in our youthful opinion, seemed unique and appropriately utopian, Zaha was usually completely unimpressed. It just meant that we had to try again and again, try harder, test every possible option, and the impossible ones as well. T is for text messages. Because Zaha could be anywhere in the world, Beirut, Istanbul, Miami, you name it, her text messages pinged us at any time of the day or the night. Brutally to the point, her command of this communicative medium was a total Gesamtkunstwerk. In a way, we can now measure her absence by all the text messages we will never receive. S is for shopping. Shopping for clothes with Zaha was fun, but it was also serious. For her, the daily practice of sketching sinuous lines which suggested a private language without words was also fun, but fundamentally serious. P is for painting. So I wanted to go and work for Zaha, not to build buildings, that seemed so pedestrian back then in the mid-90s, but to paint those paintings, the ones that collapsed several orthographic projections into a single widescreen picture plane, like the one behind me, where the vanishing points are still and accelerating outwards, at some quantum speed, warping the perspective the way light bends near a black hole. At the office, I learned that these paintings were also social condensers. Their complexity of shape and color was often the result of a group of people painting for weeks or months. In fact, this painting did take 6 months to paint. The way traditional Persian or Turkish carpets would be collectively woven in ritualized time as much as matter. N is for nicknames. People that she liked and she didn't like would often have nicknames assigned to them. Looking back, I see that what she was doing again and again was playfully infantilizing some of the most male alpha masculine architects in the world. Affectionately? Mostly, yes. Was she appropriating power through language? That too. My nickname was Shushu. K is for kindness. What is a person when they're gone? It's what remains in remembering as vividly in 10 years' time as it did 10 years ago. I remember Zaha's true kindness towards me, often forged in London traffic, inside that beat-up black cab, her in the back and me up at front at the wheel, while I wondered with all the intensity only young people possess, how did I manage to get here? I still ask the same question today, but now I can answer it. And the answer, as for so many of us in Zaha's orbit, is because of that kindness, which seemed curiously contradictory to her outward reputation. The secret was just how much and for how many that she cared. I is for Iraqi. I never recall Zaha orientalizing her work or essentializing it through a retroactive and romantic prism. In the 21st century, when emerging economies, i.e. the non-West, decided to build new icons for the new era, they went to Zaha's office. Many of these clients were in the Middle East. They were proud to be able to hire an Arab architect, but the truth is more complex and nebulous than either over-identifying with her or distancing her from her heritage and her roots. She not only produced an architectural language that iconoclashed Western and Eastern, but she embodied that personally too. She was a living international style. H is for hilarious. When asked a few months before she passed away on BBC Radio for her Desert Island Discs, she listed amongst her choices, and in all seriousness, Hotline Bling by Drake. So fucking hilarious. G is for gravity or gossip. She once said, I almost believe that there's such a thing as zero gravity. I can now believe that buildings can float. I was once privy to the unedited transcript of the interview this quote comes from, and there was plenty of gossip. It got redacted naturally, but no one gossiped quite like Zaha. People were always absent from those abstract paintings and drawings, but they were never absent from her thoughts. F is for friendship. Friendships are design projects that tend to make sense looking backwards, not forwards. Zaha's friendships were a lifelong project, maybe even a single work, a friendship Gesamtkunstwerk, with a single foundation branching off into multiplicities. She expected lifelong loyalty, but then again, what serious friendship doesn't? D is for death. The architect Adolf Loos famously declared that, quote, only the monument and the tomb were architecture. Everything else, he said, was merely building. Oscar Niemeyer, the great Brazilian architect, continued to draw and design until he was 104 years old. Philip Johnson's reincarnations went on until he was 98. Cedric Price, ever the contrarian, would give his buildings expiry dates, at which point he believed they should be taken down. Architecture often aspires to eternity, but it must contend with finitude. Architects, perhaps, share the same imperative, famously allergic to retirement, because there's no wall between their life and their work, the work and the world. C is for catch-up. The world, thankfully, finally caught up with Zaha's visions. I'm so glad that she got to live to feel that glow. B is for boring. Unlike Andy Warhol, who venerated boredom and the contours of its near-monastic state, for Zaha, the worst thing anything or anyone could be was boring. A is for architecture. See Zaha.